Many fans of The Godfather and of cinema itself still wonder, what was Marlon Brando's true vision of Vito Corleone, the legendary character he brought to life with that gravelly voice, minimal movements and a presence that dominated every scene? But what few people know is that behind that iconic role lies a curious and even dark story about how Brando saw himself, his character, and the entire world of cinema. Today, we're going to dive into that hidden side of The Godfather and discover how the man behind the Don became at the same time the creator and the prisoner of his own myth. A story that shows why the secrets behind this masterpiece remain as legendary as the film itself. When Marlon Brando received the script for The Godfather, he could not have imagined that within those pages lay the role that would forever change not only his career but also his relationship with cinema itself. The industry saw him as a problematic, difficult, outdated actor. The brilliance of A Streetcar Named Desire and On the Waterfront felt like a distant memory. The man who had once set Hollywood on fire was now considered a financial risk. Brando knew it, and perhaps that's why the name Don Corleone didn't impress him at first. An old, tired man, nothing more, he might have said as he leafed through the first pages. But there was something between the lines that drew him in. Since the role required him to make few movements, this was perfect for him. That powerful, silent man, wrapped in tenderness and brutality, was more than a mob boss. He was a father trying to keep his family together in a world that no longer obeyed any law. Brando saw not the criminal, but the fractured man, the ruined patriarch, and he decided to play him that way. On set, the transformation became almost a ritual. Brando stuffed his cheeks with cotton, lowered his voice to a near whisper, and moved with a slow, sacred gravity. His presence commanded respect not through force, but through silence. While other actors filled the screen with energy, Brando filled it with absence, an invisible magnetism that made everything revolve around him. Francis Ford Coppola understood it instantly. He didn't move, and that's precisely why he dominated the scene, the director would later recall. The audience felt it too. That soft voice and weary gaze became the moral and tragic center of an entire universe. A mere hand gesture, a slow turn, was enough to make everyone bow before him. Absolute power was expressed through restraint, and Brando's supposed laziness became its own language. The actor who had always sought pure realism, who despised theatricality and visible effort, found in Vito. But Brando didn't realize that, at that very moment, he was signing an invisible pact. The overwhelming success of The Godfather would lift him to the heavens of glory and chain him there forever. Vito Corleone would become his reflection, his prison, and his legacy. Brando won the Oscar and refused to accept it in a gesture both political and symbolic. While the world applauded the Don, he tried to distance himself from them. In private, he said the film had romanticized violence and turned a tragic man into an icon of power. Vito isn't a hero, he said. He's a man who lost control of his own world, but no one listened. The public saw only the Don, and Hollywood, ever ready to profit from a myth, began offering him endless variations of the same role, the patriarch, the mentor, the man of quiet authority and divine calm. Brando, the rebel who had once wanted to disappear inside his characters, now found himself a prisoner of a single face. During the production of The Godfather Part 2, Coppola invited him back for a flashback scene. Brando refused. He said he would never again work with Paramount, the studio that had humiliated him before the first film. And also, though he never admitted it, perhaps because he understood that Vito had completely possessed him. A character no longer needed him to exist. The Don's shadow floated over every gesture, every word, every memory. The film ended without his appearance. But the moment when everyone shouts, "Happy birthday, Papa," and the camera cuts before showing his face became the perfect metaphor. The Don was there, invisible and eternal, both in fiction and in Brando's life. In the decades that followed, the actor became increasingly distant. He played gods, generals, and monsters, and in all of them, there was the echo of the same man. In Apocalypse Now, he was Colonel Kurtz of Vito Corleone gone mad in the jungle. In Superman, a celestial father speaking with the same tone of weary wisdom. And with irony in The Freshman, he parodied himself, mocking the character that had once made the world tremble. Brando knew exactly what he was doing. He laughed, but it was a tired laugh. Because behind the irony lay a bitter truth. Vito Corleone had become an inseparable ghost, a gift that brought him glory and a curse that stole the anonymity he longed for. Isolated on his island of Titiaroa in Polynesia, Brando often reflected on his past. He spoke little, but when the subject was the Godfather, his voice grew melancholic. He said the public had turned a portrait of sorrow into a hymn to power. It wasn't about power, he repeated. It was about loss. To Brando, Vito was a man who tried to protect his family from a cruel world and ended up creating one even crueler. Deep down, the Don represented the failure of humanity's attempt to master its own fate. Vito Corleone is a man who, in building an empire, becomes its prisoner. He begins with an ideal, to protect his family, to earn respect in a hostile world, but power transforms him into a king condemned to his own throne, unable to return to the simplicity of ordinary life. He becomes a living legend, a man trapped within his own aura. Brando lived the same tragedy, only on screen. The role that made him immortal, Vito Corleone, also condemned him. After The Godfather, he found himself chained to the image of the myth, unable to escape the shadow of his own creation. Just as Vito could not leave the mafia, Brando could not leave Hollywood, even though he despised it. Each new role was an attempt to escape that always ended in surrender. From the 1970s onward, Brando descended into a deep nihilism. He no longer believed in art, glory, or morality. He saw everything as an empty machine driven by money and vanity. For him, Hollywood is a factory of illusions, and actors are puppets with pretty faces. That feeling consumed him. Brando began to sabotage his own films, to mock his characters, to ridicule directors. It was his way of taking revenge on the industry. Brando recognized Hollywood's hypocrisy, yet kept acting within it, turning his bitterness into performance. He was the real-life comedian of cinema, laughing at the absurdity of a system that both worshipped and exploited him. The paradox is that Brando and Vito share the same tragic burden. Both men reached power only to discover that, at the top, there was nothing but emptiness. Vito builds an empire but pays with his soul. Brando creates a myth but loses the joy of acting. For both, power becomes imprisonment. And silence, so present in each, turns into a form of protest, of resignation. Vito was the gift the world gave to Brando, and also his eternal punishment. It was the role that revived his career and turned him into a legend, but also the one that reduced him to a symbol, a living statue. And like Vito, he died surrounded by a bitter kind of peace. Not the peace of redemption, but that of a man who had accepted the absurdity of his own existence. Brando became the archetype of post-glory nihilism, the artist who looked inside his own myth and found nothing there. In the end, both are the same tragic figure reflected in different mirrors. And so, we understand that Vito Corleone was both a gift and a curse for Brando. A story where reality and fiction intertwine, and where the actor and his character merge into the same silent tragedy. If you love cinema, powerful performances, and the untold stories that unfold behind the camera, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss our next videos. Because here, we keep exploring the hidden side of cinema where legends never die.